Hi, my name is Rachel A. Smith. Welcome to my presentation on a library administrator for LIS 650. Hopefully my presentation will shed some light for you on what it takes to successfully lead and manage a small academic library. I currently work in special collections and university archives at Jackson Library on the campus of UNCG, so for this assignment, I wanted to interview an academic library administrator. I will begin this presentation by introducing the administrator I chose to interview, as well as the library she manages. I will explain the research methods I used during this assignment. Then I will discuss the results of my interview, which will include the library administrator's daily tasks, her ideas on leadership and management, some ideal qualities an administrator should possess, opportunities for improvement, advice for library school students, and a compare and contrast between the results garnered from the interview and our readings thus far in LIS 650. Finally, I will give my conclusions and the recommendations for this administrator. The library administrator I chose to interview, who will be referred to in this presentation as Mrs. Jones, is the director of a small academic library. The school served by this library, which will be referred to in this presentation as Smith Library, is a 4-year privately funded liberal arts college for women. Mrs. Jones has been the acting library director at Smith Library since 1999, approximately 13 years. The college has a total enrollment of 736 students, with 672 of those students being full-time and 64 part-time. The college also employs 61 full-time faculty members and offers degrees in 16 different programs of study and coursework. Within her library, Mrs. Jones oversees 5 full-time staff members and 5 student workers, including 2 graduate interns from UNCG's LIS program. In order to gain a better understanding of Mrs. Jones and her leadership style at Smith Library, I met with her to conduct a qualitative interview. I asked a series of questions regarding her managerial duties, daily tasks, problems she faces, and strategies she uses to tackle these problems. During my interview, I inquired about Mrs. Jones' day-to-day schedule as a library director. She went on to explain how no 2 days are the same, as she may have meetings to attend or run one day, the next may be filled with staff overseeing and interactivity. After hearing my explanation of the 1/3 rule, Mrs. Jones broke down into percentages her tasks as an academic library administrator. She devotes about 50% of her time to planning budget policies and reports. Because Smith Library and its college are private, thereby not state-supported, Mrs. Jones spends a majority of her time looking for outside funding and grant writing for the library and its services. She allocates about 25% of her time to internal operations, which requires her to talk with, bond with, and shadow her staff members. She explained, "If you have unhappy staff, then you have an unhappy environment." She assigns about 15% of her time to external affairs, involving meetings held away from the library. Mrs. Jones explained to me how just the day before my interview, she attended a meeting in Raleigh at the State Library of North Carolina with representatives from LSTA, the Library Services and Technology Act, to gain information on grants for her library. The remaining 10% of Mrs. Jones' time is spent gauging the environment out front in the public areas of her library and performing action research via surveys. She does this in order to get a feel for her patrons and to see what the library is doing right and doing wrong as an organization. Mrs. Jones had simple definitions for what leadership and management mean to her. In her opinion, you lead people while you manage tasks. She went on to say that in order for one to lead, one must first establish relationships. She explained that one has to be able to relate to the people whom he or she is leading, because it is impossible to be on a journey with the title of leader if no one is following you. You have to have someone follow you in order to be an actual leader. On the subject of management, she said that it all comes down to tasks and being able to handle responsibilities as far as duties are concerned. She said the successful management of tasks makes leadership easy. Mrs. Jones relayed to me quite a few ideal qualities which she believes are essential to successful administrators. Among these were remaining flexible yet stern, open, attentive, honest, caring, polite, and human. She went on to say that successful administrators should not micromanage, should always realize that they are a part of a growing organization that is not perfect, and should remind themselves often that they are not omniscient or all-knowing. Mrs. Jones bestowed upon me a couple pieces of advice during this interview. As a new graduate, try not to limit yourself. She reminisced on a time when she met Dr. Paul LeClaire, former president and CEO of New York Public Library. She passed on to me a lesson which Dr. LeClaire passed on to her at that time. Relationship building is key. She told me to remain steadfast and optimistic as I matriculate through library school and then enter into the library profession. On a scale of 1 to 10, Mrs. Jones said that she is about a 4 when it comes to how confident she is that organizational goals are being met by the college served by her library. However, she would allow a 7 on the scale for how confident she is that the needs of the students are being met by the library and its staff. She attributed the lower number to the level of help she receives from collegiate administration, but she attributed the higher number to the level of commitment her staff members have and the general concern they have for the needs of their student patrons. Her biggest opportunity for improvement would be better conditions via a new library building, as well as newer resources in and for the library and its patrons. You are seeing an actual photo of the Stacks section at Smith Library. In LIS 650, we have read Blanchard and Bowles' Raving Fans, A Revolutionary Approach to Customer Service, as well as Buckingham and Kaufman's First Break All the Rules. As I compare and contrast the results of this administrator interview to these readings, I find that the first 2 of the 3 secrets to creating raving fans apply to Mrs. Jones and Smith Library. The first secret is decide what you want. She has set out organizational goals, and she definitely has a well-thought-out vision for how her library should operate. The second secret is discover what the customer wants. She surveys Smith Library patrons each semester to gauge what the students, faculty, and staff members are lacking and what they think would benefit the library. As far as the third secret, deliver your vision plus 1%, I think she and her organization are doing the best they can with the resources they have, but that they still have far to go. Following the interview, I asked 2 Smith Library employees the 12 questions from First Break All the Rules, which are as follows. Number 1, do I know what is expected of me at work? 2, do I have the materials and equipment I need to do my work right? 3, at work, do I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day? 4, in the last 7 days, have I received recognition or praise for good work? 5, does my supervisor or someone at work seem to care about me as a person? 6, is there someone at work who encourages my development? 7, at work, do my opinions seem to count? 8, does the mission or purpose of my company make me feel like my work is important? 9, are my co-workers committed to doing quality work? 10, do I have a best friend at work? 11, in the last 6 months, have I talked with someone about my progress? And 12, at work, have I had opportunities to learn and grow? The first employee, a cataloger, answered yes to all of the questions except question 3. At work, do I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day? And question 12, do I have a best friend at work? The second employee, a reference librarian, answered yes to all questions except question 10. I attribute them both replying negatively to question 10 to there being a lack of options within the organization. Smith Library is a small academic library with only 6 people holding official positions, with Mrs. Jones included in that number. With all of these facts considered, I think that the 12 questions definitely relate to this library and its administrator. Moreover, because of the responses by Mrs. Jones during her interview and the 2 employees when asked the 12 questions, I think that Smith Library is being led and managed successfully. Along with my pretty face, you are also seeing an actual picture of the building which houses Smith Library. I learned quite a bit from this interview. This experience with Mrs. Jones not only provided me a behind-the-scenes look at the business behind library administration, but it also allowed me to see the more personal side of managing an organization. I admire the level of compassion that Mrs. Jones has, not only for her patrons and the Smith Library collegiate community, but also for her employees. I was able to witness firsthand the camaraderie that exists between library director, cataloger, reference librarian, and circulation desk operator when I came in for this interview. In the reading so far this semester, I have learned what to do and what not to do in order to be a successful manager and leader. However, it was during this visit to Smith Library and through the interview that I was able to fully grasp the pearls of wisdom written in First Break All the Rules, Raving Fans, The Customer-Driven Library, and Library Technology and User Services. I do believe that this is a shining example of how the 3 secrets to creating raving fans and how the 12 questions, coupled together as the 3 plus 12, can work in a library setting. Thank you so much for watching. Again, I am Rachel Smith, and this has been my presentation of a library administrator interview for course 650 in the Library and Information Studies program at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. Thank you.